Hello, my name is Morgan Willison. I use she, they pronouns, and today I will be discussing the ways that transgender and non-binary college students define having sex. Existing scholarship studying personal definitions of having sex overwhelmingly relies on a strict gender binary and the conformity of bodies to cisgender norms. Differences in definitions of having sex may affect sex education, medical inquiry, and students' own perceptions of their risk for sexually transmitted diseases. Miscommunication in this area may skew important data on sexual behaviors, health, and well-being. In 1999, Sanders and Reinisch published the first recorded study assessing cisgender heterosexual individuals' definitions of having sex. This study, and several others like it, found that penile vaginal intercourse was overwhelmingly agreed upon to be this population's definition of having sex, while other sexual acts lacked such conclusive results. When researchers focused on cisgender lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals, significant variance in definitions of having sex was found. While this was a forward step for sexuality study, these LGBT-centered studies still rely on cisgender norms, and I have so far been unable to find any equivalent studies pertaining to or even explicitly including transgender and non-binary people. Many of these studies used a checkbox approach, essentially presenting participants with a list of actions and asking them to check yes, it is sex, or no, it is not sex. Very few of these studies offered a graded scale for more nuance, and even fewer included open response areas for participants to explain why they answered as they did. Our participants were 8 college students over the age of 18 years old who self-identified as non-cisgender. The spread of their gender identities is visualized in the figure on the left. Participants were recruited through virtual flyers sent out by college LGBTQ+ organizations, posts soliciting participation on social media, and flyers around Boston, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. Upon completing a pre-screened survey, selected participants completed a virtual, written, or Zoom interview at the participant's discretion. 2 options were given to increase accessibility. After the interviews were completed, the researchers de-identified the transcripts and used a phenomenology framework of analysis to individually code the data and develop themes to answer our research questions. How do transgender and non-binary students define and describe having sex? How do transgender and non-binary students' gender identities impact their sexual experiences? And what factors impact transgender and non-binary students' definitions of having sex? Participants were asked multiple questions surrounding their definitions and descriptions of having sex, such as, what does the phrase having sex mean to you? Most important to note from our findings is that no homogeneous, non-cisgender definition of having sex revealed itself. In fact, the one thing that every participant agreed upon was the idea that the definition of having sex is subjective. As shown in the chart here, some participants base their personal definitions on the type of relationship or connection between them and their partners, while others use the actions performed, goals achieved, or simply the experience of sexual gratification or pleasure. Though some participants' definitions relied solely on the actions performed, most participants considered the context around the actions to inform their definitions. One participant, Sasha, a non-binary 22-year-old, explained, I think the actual actions matter less than the intention and feeling. If all the people involved want to derive sexual pleasure, then it is sex. Their phrasing here is important. Whenever the experience or goal of pleasure was mentioned by participants, all of them used the word pleasure or gratification, not orgasm. This distinction is purposeful. As one participant explained, I do not believe sex is identified by an orgasm. It's about experiencing pleasure and connecting with another person or people. Theo, a 19-year-old transgender man, explained that because he is unable to achieve orgasm under any circumstances, he had to rebuild his definition of sex from his original expectations. Another participant, Casey, a genderqueer trans feminine 19-year-old, recounted a similar experience, specifically related to their medical transition. They wrote, I think most people think sex has to conclude with an orgasm, but sometimes that is just not possible with my body. Hormone replacement therapy has completely changed how I experience sex, and that in turn has changed how I define it. Both Theo and Casey described redefining having sex based on their abilities and experiences. This trend of personal definitions of having sex based on each participant's life, body, and experiences was exhibited by every participant in our sample. Nico, a non-binary 21-year-old, attributed this phenomenon to their identity, explaining, Being queer and trans has made me believe that the definition of sex is very fluid and personal. Theo agreed. He wrote, I think most trans people's sex lives are heavily influenced by our transness, and therefore our definitions of sex often are too. Existing outside of cisgender norms forced participants to adapt and create their own definitions of having sex, separate from the cis heteronormative definitions that they learned from sex education classes, popular media, and their peers. Casey explained, the definition of sex that we are taught by society, one focused around a penis, a vagina, and penetration, is one that just cannot apply to my experiences. Under a different definition than my own, I am unable to have sex, and yet I still do. The participants' need to redefine and construct their own definitions of having sex speaks to a lack of available queer, trans, and non-binary inclusive definitions independent of cisgender norms. More research is needed regarding non-cisgender adolescents and young adults' definitions of having sex to understand if this trend is reflected in the larger community and to develop inclusive solutions. Thank you so much for listening, and a very special thank you to my principal investigator, Professor Eli Keene, for their support and guidance. If you have any questions, I will be available online at the designated Q&A time or anytime in person at the conference. Thank you.